Raider Nation, what's up? Welcome back to Silver and Black Today, powered by Sportsnaut. Told you we're not going anywhere. I'm your host, Scott Gulbransen, and we're coming at you today because guess what? The Raiders making news. Yeah, that always happens, right? We don't take days off here. And oh, yes, the Raiders made news over the last couple weeks, even though it's the downtime in the NFL. Now, before I get into it, I want you to take a breath. Put down X/Twitter. Put down whatever Reddit thread has you spiraling right now, because I'm going to explain what exactly happened with this whole Mark Davis succession plan story. And more importantly, I'm going to tell you why the hot takes you've been reading are mostly wrong. Even some of you coming at me on X are wrong, and I'll tell you why. We good? All right, let's get into it. So here's the deal. Last Thursday, if you read ESPN's Seth Wickersham and Don Van Natta, two guys who don't exactly do fluff pieces, dropped a report that NFL owners are set to vote on a Las Vegas Raiders succession plan at the league's annual spring meeting in Phoenix. That meeting takes place on March 29th, so we're talking about this coming weekend as they get started down in the desert. Of course, the NFL owners meeting, always fun, always news coming out of that, and so we'll see what happens. But the plan at its core does two things. First, it would allow Mark Davis to sell roughly another 7% of the franchise on top of what he's already sold to Silver Lake co-CEO Egon Durban and another limited partner, a guy named Michael Meldman. And that sale would value the Raiders at just under $10 billion, by the way. $10 billion. Second, and this is the part that sent everyone sort of into a meltdown. The plan gives Durban the option to purchase a majority stake in the franchise if and when Davis decides to sell. Key phrase, if and when. Now, here's what came with that report. A source close to Davis, and look, I'll get to the anonymity thing in a second, told ESPN, quote, Mark has no intention to sell his majority stake in the team. This sets up a smooth succession plan. And Davis himself, he confirmed the broad strokes to the Las Vegas Review-Journal, but kept it short. No big press conference, no expounding on it, no dramatic statement. I mean, it was very on brand for Mark. So that's the news. That's what happened. Now, let me tell you what it doesn't mean. The moment this story dropped, you had two camps, right? Camp one, and I understand this camp, I really do, said, here we go. Davis is finally cashing out. Silver Lake is taking over. The Davis era is ending. Camp 2, which honestly was a smaller group, said, this is just responsible ownership planning. Nothing to see here. I'm firmly in Camp 2, and let me tell you why that is, should you care. Mark Davis turns 71 in May. He's got no kids. He inherited this team when Al Davis passed away in 2011, and he's been running it ever since. Not so great, as we've all talked about many times. Now, and I mean this with zero disrespect, of course, at some point, every owner has to answer the question of what happens next. Davis doesn't have a kid to hand the keys to like his dad did. He doesn't have a direct heir waiting in the wings. So what does he do? He does exactly what any smart business person in his position does. He identifies a trusted partner who's already inside the organization, gets him pre-approved by the league, and creates a plan and a clean pathway so that if anything happens, a death, a change of heart, whatever, the franchise doesn't end up in a courtroom for 5 years while the lawyers sort it out. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, right? That's not a sell signal. That's called being prepared. Now, your good buddy, Mike Florio over at Pro Football Talk, smart guy, great at reading between the lines sometimes, but sometimes he reads too far in between the lines, if you catch my drift, made the point that this essentially gives Durban the right of first refusal and, quote, blocks Davis from selling to anyone else. And technically, he's not wrong. That's a real component of what this plan does. But here's my pushback for all of you out there. If you're Mark Davis and you're already brought, but here's my pushback. If you're Mark Davis and you've already brought Egon Durban in as a minority partner, and you've already said publicly that Durban is going to help the organization on the business side, why wouldn't you give that guy a clear path to the chair? You already told the world that you trust him with your franchise. Now, this is just a this is a formal version of that trust. So now you might be asking, okay, so who is this Egon Durban anyway? Well, let me take a minute because I think a lot of Raider fans hear Silver Lake private equity guy and they immediately start picturing some corporate suit who's going to strip the team down and sell it for parts like a 1987 Camaro. But that's not the case here. So when you look at Egon Durban, he's not one of those guys. The guy is 52 years old, yes, younger than me. He's a Georgetown finance grad. He's been with Silver Lake since day one, since 1999 when the firm opened its doors. He's on the boards of TKO Group, which is UFC, WWE, you name it, Dell Technologies, Waymo, those cars that drive themselves. He's been around major sports and entertainment businesses his entire career, just so you know. And critically, he bought into the Raiders in December of 2024. He didn't just write a check and disappear. Davis said at the time that Durban and Meldman were going to help, quote, immensely on the business side. That's a real role, not a vanity stake. So when you're trying to figure out whether to panic about who might eventually run this franchise, consider that the guy in the succession seat is a sports and entertainment veteran who already has real skin in the game. That's not the worst case scenario, not even close, Raider Nation. Now, here's the context that everyone's ignoring. The detail I think that got buried in all of the noise, and it's very easy to have a lot of noise these days, and it's the one that matters the most to me personally. Last October, Mark Davis's mother, Carol Davis, passed away, as you know. She was a significant part of this franchise's history, and her passing was a real loss for the Davis family and for Raider Nation. When she died, her shares of the Raiders passed to Mark. So right now, in March of 2026, Mark Davis holds more of this franchise than he did 6 months ago. His ownership stake just got larger, not smaller. You tell me, does that sound like a guy who's setting up to walk away? Now, some of you have mentioned, oh, well, he's going to have to pay all these fees and taxes because of the estate. We'll get to that. Because to me, what's buried in the lead in all of this coverage is that everyone's focused on Durban and the succession vote, and nobody's talking about the fact that Davis just consolidated more control over the team he's owned since 2011. The Davis family has been part of the franchise since 1963, as you know, 63 years. That's not a number you just walk away from because a private equity firm waved a big check at you. And yes, they had estate planning for Carol Davis, so Mark Davis doesn't have to cash out the team to pay his bills. All right, let me bring you back to football for a second, because I know some of you are listening to this and you're thinking, Scott, I care about the draft. I care about what Spytek is doing. I care about whether or not we can actually be competitive under Clint Kubiak. What does any of this ownership stuff have to do with that, with the on-field product, with whether or not the Raiders get out of this 30-year funk that they've been in? It's fair. It's a great question. Here's the connection that I want to make for you on how this off-the-field stuff matters and why it can affect the football team. And that's stability at the top. It matters. Ownership uncertainty, real ownership uncertainty, creates chaos in front offices. GMs don't know if their mandates are going to shift. Coaches don't know what they're building for. Free agents get nervous. It's a real thing, and we've seen it play out before. What the succession plan actually does, if you squint at it the right way, is reduce that uncertainty. The league knows the plan. The front office knows the plan. Spytek can go about the business of building this roster without anyone whispering that the whole thing might get flipped on its head next year with some new ownership group. And right now, John Spytek needs that clarity. This offseason has been active. The team is clearly in a build phase. New head coach, new offensive identity under Kubiak, a #1 overall pick sitting in their hands going into the draft this spring in Pittsburgh. This is a critical window for the Raiders. The last thing the organization needs is any ownership distraction. The succession plan counterintuitively removes a potential distraction. It doesn't create one. So, again, you might have some questions. I'd be happy to field those that I can. So here's where I land on all of this, just to sum it up. Mark Davis is not selling the Raiders, period. End of story. The succession plan is not a for sale sign. It is an owner, one who is 70 years old with no direct heir and has been around long enough to see what happens when these things aren't handled cleanly, doing the responsible thing. It is a little weird that the confirmation came from an unknown source instead of Davis himself stepping to a microphone, right? And yeah, I'm trying to think of a way to say this. Yeah, a little. That's very Mark Davis, though, is it not? He's never been the most forthcoming communicator, and that's been a source of frustration for this fan base for years, as well as the mismanagement of the team overall, which you can't deny based on the results. But the message is clear. Even if the messenger is anonymous, the Raiders are not for sale. So those of you who want Mark Davis to sell, sorry to disappoint you. Egon Durban is not taking over. Tom Brady is not being frozen out, at least not based on anything in this report. John Spytek is still running the football operation. Clint Kubiak, as the coach, is still building his offense and the rest of how his team will come together. Life goes on in Raider Nation. Now, will things eventually change? Of course they will. They always do. If you go through life with no change, talk to me because I've never heard of it. At some point, this franchise will have a different majority owner. That's just reality. Davis is 70, not 40, but at some point, and right now, are two very different things. And the national media has been blurring that line all week. We're not there yet, not even close. What we see is a team with a #1 overall pick, an ascending young GM, a first-year coach with something to prove, and an owner who, whatever you think of his track record, still cares deeply about this franchise and what it stands for based on his father's legacy, of course, Mr. Al Davis. That's the story. That's what matters, Raider Nation. That's it. All right. Now, before I go, let's get on to some other news. Let's talk Maxx Crosby. Tom Pelissero reported the Raiders and Crosby are not entertaining offers for the all-world defensive end. After, of course, the botched trade to Baltimore, it sounds like Crosby is all in again. So I like this. I like the fact that Maxx Crosby is, after this trade didn't go down, is ready to recommit to the Raiders. He's always said he wanted to be a Raider for life. He went through all the turmoil. So when he got traded to Baltimore, he was excited. It was a change. I understand that. When you're in a place where you don't have a lot of success outside of personal success, not team success, then, I get it. I understood why he was okay being traded and why he sort of was in favor of it. Now, as I said, the day after the first day of free agency, when the Raiders made so many signings and improved greatly in one day, was, boy, Maxx Crosby left a team and they did a whole bunch of things that he would have been much happier with. So I think Maxx Crosby, with this trade, it might be a blessing in disguise. Well, it is a blessing in disguise. He doesn't get traded. He is now on a Raider team that's in a much different position. They got a young head coach who's really sought after. They're going to have the first pick in the draft, an exciting quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. They went out and they put bodies on that defense to help Maxx Crosby. He jumps into a defense much better than when he left. So I think that, I'm sure, went a long way for them smoothing things out with Maxx Crosby. And so now Maxx Crosby can focus on being part of this build. Yes, he's at the apex. Yes, he wants to win. He's got all the personal accolades. Now he wants to win. This team, they might be 1-2 years away from being a playoff push team, as I believe, but they are much closer. And he clearly, after talking with Spytek, with Davis, with Kubiak, he clearly now sees the vision and believes in it, because if the report from Pelissero is true, then they're not entertaining offers, I should say, for him on the trade market. So we'll see how it goes all down, but I think that this is all something very good for this Raiders team and Raider Nation when you have a face of the franchise who was suddenly traded away but now is back, and then you get Fernando Mendoza. You got a lot of good things going for the Raiders. Don't get your Super Bowl tickets ready for next year or anything like that. As I said in one of my pieces up on Sportsnaut, just pump the brakes a little bit. This team's going to have to grow. It's going to have its pains. but at least everything is going in the right direction, from the ownership succession to the coach, to the GM, to the free agents, to the draft coming up. Very exciting days as we steam towards the draft next month. And yes, we will be covering the draft. Don't forget, you can read all of our stuff. My stuff, we have Brevin Honda on board now. We have some other writers coming on board, as Silver and Black Today is now an online community powered by Sportsnaut, of course, at sportsnaut.com. You can go to silverandblacktoday.com or you can go to sportsnaut.com, either one, and find our work there. We'll also be back here with video, with audio, as time marches on. So please do that. Follow us there. Follow us then. Mo will still be right. Mo Moten, my partner, still back. We're still hanging. He'll still be writing for Silver and Black Today, powered by Sportsnaut. He'll also jump in as we do some videos. And I got the sun shining on me. See how exciting it is for you, Raider Nation? Anyway, guys, thanks for joining me for this podcast / video from Silver and Black Today, powered by Sportsnaut. And we will see you next time. It's Scott Gulbransen. Have a great rest of your week, Raider Nation. Take care. We'll see you next time.